My name is Rachel Monroe, and I used to be the family favorite. It wasn't something I flaunted or even noticed much growing up. It was just how things were. I got straight A's, skipped a grade, and was the first in our family to get accepted into a top engineering program. My mom kept the acceptance letter on the fridge like a photo of a newborn, and my dad told anyone who'd listen that his daughter would build rockets one day. I didn't know it at the time, but those moments were the peak of something I would spend years trying to understand. Back then, my little sister Emily was still in middle school, all elbows and oversized glasses clinging to my arm every chance she got. She looked up to me, copied the way I wrote my notes, even tried to teach herself Python because she thought it would make us closer. And maybe it did for a while, but that kind of closeness doesn't always survive grief. Everything changed the summer before I started college. My mom had been tired a lot, brushing it off as stress, but I noticed the way she held her side when she got up too fast. One afternoon, she fainted in the kitchen, and the diagnosis came fast and cruel: pancreatic cancer, late stage. I deferred my admission thinking it would be a short pause, just a semester maybe. But cancer doesn't run on academic calendars, and by the time fall came, my mom couldn't walk without help. My dad, usually the steady one, turned inward, moving like he was underwater. I picked up the slack, managed the meds, cooked, cleaned, called doctors, sorted through insurance paperwork I barely understood. Emily retreated to her room and stayed there. When our mom passed, it wasn't loud or dramatic. She just slipped away in her sleep one morning as if she couldn't bear to take up space anymore. We buried her in the blue dress she wore to Emily's 8th grade recital. I remember staring at the dress more than the casket. That's how numb I was. After the funeral, I didn't go back to school. The scholarship had lapsed. My dad barely spoke. Emily didn't cry. The house felt like a shell someone had forgotten to lock up. I got a part-time job at a local electronics store to pay the bills, telling myself I'd go back the next year. That year never came. People think losing someone is the moment they die, but really, it's what happens after. The weeks where no one cooks, the bills that still show up, the conversations that never happen. I became the person who fixed what was broken, not because I chose to, but because someone had to. My hands stayed busy so my mind wouldn't spiral. There's a strange kind of grief in being replaced by your own stillness. Everyone around me moved on. Emily went to college, posted pictures of dorm life, made friends who never knew she had a sister, who used to dream of building machines that flew. My dad sold the car, got a dog, stopped asking where I was headed when I left the house. But I wasn't angry. Not then. I was just tired. And somewhere in that tiredness, I stopped being the golden child. Not because I failed, but because I was no longer shining in a way people could see. Looking back, I think that's when I began becoming someone new. Not Rachel the achiever, not Rachel the dropout, just Rachel, quiet, watching, learning to measure worth in something other than applause. While Emily was out chasing internships and posting snapshots from her university's robotics lab, I was standing behind a customer service counter, fixing phones that wouldn't charge and laptops that flickered when they opened. I didn't envy her, but I noticed how easily people seemed to root for her while I faded quietly into a role no one talked about. At family gatherings, they asked Emily about classes, about professors they'd never met, about the startup she might join after graduation. They never asked what I was working on. If I mentioned my job, it was usually followed by a polite smile and a fast change of subject, like I'd brought up something uncomfortable. That feeling stuck with me. I started picking up broken things people left out for the trash: radios, old clocks, small appliances that still had stories inside them. I'd sit on the kitchen floor with screwdrivers and pliers, wiping dust off metal parts like I was waking something up. I burned out more than I saved in the beginning, but I kept at it. I found a rhythm in it. My days started with coffee and wire cutters, afternoons filled with the hum of old motors and the satisfaction of fixing something by hand. I wasn't building software anymore, but I was still solving problems. There was a strange peace in that. When Emily came home for winter break, she brought expensive luggage and talked about professors by their first names. She had an internship lined up and a new haircut that made her look older, more polished. Our dad lit up when she walked in. I didn't blame him. She was easier to celebrate. I watched her from across the dinner table. She was articulate, animated, bright in all the ways people wanted to see. I sat next to a casserole I'd made and listened as she described her projects. When she turned to me and asked how work was going, it wasn't unkind. It just felt practiced. I told her I was thinking of starting something small on my own, a repair service. She nodded but didn't ask questions. Then she joked that maybe I could fix her old hair straightener. Everyone laughed. I smiled too, but it landed in my stomach and stayed there. That's how it went for a while. Emily rose. I stayed behind, but staying behind doesn't mean staying still. I began fixing neighbors' appliances. Friends of friends started dropping off broken items. I charged a little mostly to cover materials and put the rest into a jar. By the time Emily graduated, I had turned our garage into a small workshop. I hand-painted a sign, printed out flyers, and set up a basic website. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. People showed up. Still, my family didn't ask much about it. It didn't look like success to them. It didn't have a title or benefits package or a logo they recognized. I didn't correct them. I let them think what they wanted. Some things can't be explained to people who aren't ready to see them. At some point, Emily stopped calling as much. She got busy. Promotions, new cities, new offices. I saw her on LinkedIn once, speaking on a panel about innovation in tech. I watched the clip on mute. She looked confident, sure of herself, a long way from the little girl with taped glasses who used to sit on my bed. And I was still in the same town, still taking apart old coffee makers and mending frayed power cords, still handing fixed radios back to people who smiled like I'd returned a piece of their past. I don't think Emily ever meant to make me feel small, but sometimes, when you shine in a way people don't understand, they pretend it doesn't matter. I stopped expecting anyone to notice. I just kept building one repair at a time. Not a future anyone else imagined for me, but one that felt like mine. Emily's company party was on the rooftop of some glossy downtown building with floor-to-ceiling glass and string lights that glowed like stage props. The view was stunning. The wine was imported, and the kind of music that makes you feel underdressed played low in the background. I arrived 10 minutes early, holding a small bag of locally roasted coffee I knew she used to like, and instantly wondered if bringing it had been a mistake. No one noticed me at first, which was fine. I'm good at edges. I stood near the buffet sipping club soda, watching people in tailored suits make jokes they'd already practiced in their heads. Emily floated through the crowd like she belonged there, her laugh sharp and deliberate, one hand holding a wine glass, the other emphasizing whatever story she was telling. Eventually, she saw me. Her smile widened just a little too much, like she was about to present something, not greet someone. She raised her voice just enough for the people around her to hear, then said my name with a kind of performance edge. I nodded, gave a polite hello, but the moment was already turning. She introduced me to the group. This is my sister Rachel. She fixes electronics. Her tone was soft, but there was a curl to it, a subtle emphasis on the word fixes. Like it was charming. I still used my hands. Someone asked if I worked in IT. Emily laughed and said, not exactly, she can fix anything with a plug. Think of her like a walking warranty. People chuckled. I didn't. I smiled though, because that's what you do when your own sister turns you into the punchline. I told them I ran a repair and refurbishment shop, but my voice felt small in the space between their laughter and her posture. Emily leaned into a man beside her and said something about how I once refused to let Mom upgrade her blender because I insisted on fixing it. That was true. What she didn't say was that it was the last thing Mom used before she got too weak to cook. I had stayed up until 2 in the morning trying to get it working again because she asked me to. But stories only land when the audience wants the weight of them. These people didn't. So I stayed quiet, let the moment pass, let the tension sit in my chest like a wire pulled tight. I turned toward the snack table and pretended to study the cheese labels like they held secrets. No one stopped her. No one redirected the conversation. That kind of cruelty isn't loud, it's casual, and it's most painful when wrapped in good manners. For a second, I thought about leaving. I didn't belong there. I knew that, but something in me decided to stay, not out of pride, but because walking away would have felt like agreeing with her version of me. I'd learned how to stay put in uncomfortable spaces, and this was just another room where I didn't need to explain myself. Not yet. The elevator chimed. You know that moment when a room shifts before anyone says a word? That's what happened when Marissa Kane stepped onto the rooftop. She wore a burgundy suit that caught the light, sleek hair pulled back, no need for introduction. People straightened without thinking. Conversations paused mid-laugh. Emily instinctively turned toward her, already half smiling like a student waiting to be chosen. But Marissa didn't stop at her. She didn't even glance in her direction. She walked past clusters of executives and glassy smiles and came straight toward me. The room thinned behind her like people forgot how to stand naturally. She held out her hand and said she hadn't expected to see me here. I shook it steady, Said neither did I. Emily's voice broke behind me, small and unsure, asking if we knew each other. Marissa turned just slightly and said yes, that her company had been using my shop for over 2 years through a logistics partner, that my diagnostics had saved them time and money, that my team had maintained a 97% turnaround rate their internal engineers couldn't match. The silence cracked open after that. You could hear someone set down a wine glass a little too carefully. Emily blinked fast, piecing together what had just happened. I didn't say anything more. I didn't need to. Marissa's words had done what mine never could. She smiled, nodded once, and moved on to greet someone else. The ripple she left behind moved through the crowd. Heads turned. Conversations restarted, only now I was no longer invisible. I was still standing in the same shoes in the same spot, but the air around me had changed. I didn't look at Emily right away. I let the weight of the moment settle on its own. I hadn't come to be noticed. I hadn't come to win. But for the first time in a long time, the truth didn't whisper. It walked into the room wearing a name badge, and it said my name first. The first time I opened up a circuit board, I had no idea what I was looking at. It was a tangled mess of copper lines and stubborn screws, and I must have watched the same tutorial 3 times before I even picked up the screwdriver. But when I finally got the old fan working again, something quiet settled in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Fixing things started as necessity. Our oven kept tripping the breaker, the dryer door wouldn't latch, and I couldn't afford to call for help. So I taught myself. One broken appliance at a time. I made mistakes, fried more than a few wires, and burned the tips of my fingers more times than I want to admit. But there's a kind of power in holding a tool and knowing how to make something work again. My hands began to remember what my mind was too tired to explain. I started picking up discarded items at garage sales, buying broken electronics off online marketplaces and turning them into something functional again. People noticed. Not all at once, but enough. A neighbor came by with her vacuum. A friend of a friend asked if I could look at an old stereo. I charged barely anything, just enough to cover parts and keep the lights on. What I gained couldn't be measured in dollars anyway. There's a dignity that comes with making something useful with your own 2 hands. A kind of peace in solving a problem no one else had the time or patience to fix. I wasn't trying to be impressive. I just wanted to matter in my own way again. One day, a woman came in holding a small coffee machine like it was made of glass. She was older, soft-spoken, with hands that trembled a little as she set it on my counter. She said her husband used it every morning before he passed, and it hadn't worked since. She couldn't bring herself to throw it out, but she didn't expect much either. I took my time with that one. Replaced a worn-out switch, cleaned the mineral buildup, tightened the heating coil. When I plugged it in and it sputtered to life, I called her right away. She came back the next morning. The moment I handed it to her running and warm, she covered her mouth and started to cry. Not loud sobs, just a quiet, grateful weeping like something long stuck had finally moved. She said it felt like having a piece of him back. And in that moment, standing in my little shop, surrounded by scratched shelves and mismatched cords, I realized I'd found something law school never promised me. I'd found meaning. Not flashy or framed on a wall, but real, steady, and deeply mine. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval anymore. I was finally building a life that felt like it fit, not perfectly, but fully. The first time I hired someone, it felt like I was signing a contract with a version of myself I wasn't sure I deserved to become. It wasn't a big team or anything. Just Sam, a retired electrician who came in twice a week and taught me more in 2 months than I'd learned in 2 years on my own. A few months later, Miles joined us. He was 17 sharp with his hands and hungry to learn. I paid him fairly on time and made sure he knew his work mattered. It wasn't much, but for a kid like him, it felt like a start. For me, it felt like proof I was doing something right. Then came the pandemic. Our little shop was quiet for weeks. No walk-ins, no small talk. Just the sound of the fan over my workbench and the occasional ring of a distant delivery truck. I almost shut down twice, but I didn't. Instead, I adjusted. Set up a contactless drop box. Cleaned every tool, every surface, every piece of equipment by hand. My regulars came back slowly. Word spread carefully. We made it through. I didn't post about it. I didn't make a speech. I just kept the lights on. Later, we picked up a new contract through a logistics partner. Bulk orders, mostly warehouse returns with busted ports and faulty wiring. No one told me where they came from at first, just serial numbers and deadlines. I didn't ask. I just made sure the jobs got done right and on time. Eventually, I traced one of the shipments back to a name I recognized. A tech firm Emily never stopped bragging about. Turned out they were using a subcontractor. That subcontractor used us. For 2 years, we'd been holding up a corner of their operations. Silently, consistently. I never mentioned it to Emily. Not because I was hiding it, but because it didn't need to be said. She wouldn't have understood anyway. The victories I cared about didn't come with titles or stage lights. They came in the form of a working laptop returned just before a student's final, or a grandmother hugging a refurbished fan in the middle of July, or Sam smiling as he packed up for the day and said he hadn't felt this useful in years. No one clapped for those things. There were no press releases or promotions, just quiet wins, sturdy ones. I held on to them like threads in a worn sweater. They didn't shout, but they stayed. Over time, those quiet wins built something stronger than recognition. They built self-respect, the kind that doesn't flinch when overlooked, the kind that doesn't crumble when someone else walks in louder. I didn't need to be seen. I just needed to keep showing up, and I did, every single day. Emily found me by the balcony after most people had drifted toward the bar or the catered desserts. Her heels clicked softly against the tile, but her voice was quieter than usual. She looked like someone who didn't know where to begin. She said she didn't know, that she never realized it was me fixing all those units. Her tone wasn't defensive, it was lost. I just nodded, letting the silence stretch a little. She said she never meant to embarrass me. I looked at her and said, yes, you did. Not angry, just stating it plainly. You just didn't expect it to backfire. That part made her flinch and she looked away. She said she worked hard, that she'd been trying to build something in her own right. I believed her, but I also knew that building something never gave you permission to tear someone else down, especially not your own sister. She said she always thought I'd given up, that I stopped trying. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I didn't settle. I rebuilt. Her mouth parted like she wanted to respond, but nothing came out. So I kept going. A lot of people thought I failed, I told her. That's the luxury of distance. You get to shape the story however it makes you feel better. But I was there. I know what it took, what it cost. She blinked fast, then asked if I came that night to prove something. I almost laughed, just once, quiet and short. No, I said. I came because you asked. I didn't know it would unfold this way, but I'm not sorry it did. She nodded slowly, still holding her wine glass like it grounded her. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she said she was sorry. I believed her, but I didn't need it. I told her good. Now, do better. That was enough for me. Not a grudge, not a speech. Just a line she could carry with her or not. What she did with it wasn't mine to manage anymore. She stood there for a while. I didn't press her. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. I recognized that kind of tired. It came from holding too much for too long and finally setting some of it down. When I turned to leave, she didn't stop me. No dramatic goodbye, no tearful hug, just a quiet moment between two people who had finally seen each other clearly for the first time in years. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt calm, like the air had cleared, like something long tangled had finally been combed through gently enough to let go. And in that calm, I understood something I wish I had learned sooner. That respect doesn't always show up in applause or recognition. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in the choice not to argue, in the decision to walk away without resentment in your hands. That night, I left with nothing but my purse and a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. I had no need to be louder. I had no need to be right. I had already chosen peace, and I had already found it. Later that evening, just before I left, Marissa found me again. She had a drink in one hand and the same calm confidence in her voice. She said my work stood out, that if I ever wanted to bypass the middlemen and work directly with her team, I should give her a call. She handed me a card. It was sleek, heavy with embossed lettering and a number written in her handwriting. I thanked her, tucked it into my purse, and didn't promise anything. I didn't look at it that night. Not on the elevator ride down, not in the car on the way home. I wasn't avoiding it. I just didn't need it to mean more than it already did. It was enough to be offered the chance and know that the offer came, without me asking for it. Back at the shop the next morning, I found a quiet moment between repairs and slipped the card into a drawer. I didn't put it on display or tape it to the wall. I let it rest beneath a small pile of receipts and an old user manual for a broken blender I'd fixed twice. I never called. Not because I wasn't tempted, but because I realized I didn't need a bigger title or a high-rise office to prove anything. I already had what I needed. I had work that felt honest. I had a team that trusted me. I had clients who came back not for a brand, but for care. Every so often, when I'm reorganizing or looking for a warranty slip, I find the card again. I hold it for a second trace, the raised print with my thumb, and each time I smile. It reminds me that I didn't wait to be discovered. I didn't chase approval. I built something steady in a quiet corner of the city with chipped paint and humming solder irons. And that was enough. That card doesn't represent a missed opportunity. It represents something I earned on my own terms, a recognition that arrived not with applause, but with respect. The kind that shows up when you've done the work long enough that your results start speaking for you. Success didn't knock loudly on my door. It slipped in gently through consistency, through trust, through late nights bent over tiny screws and burnt circuits, through clients who cried when their memories came back to life with the flip of a switch. I didn't build a business to prove my worth. I built it because I needed something real to hold on to, and in the process I found a version of myself that didn't need spotlight to shine. The card stays in the drawer, not forgotten, just grounded, like me. Most mornings now, I open the shop before the sun finishes rising. The neighborhood is quiet and the street still smells like dew and old pavement. I flip the sign, brew a weak cup of coffee, and wait for the first repair of the day to come through the door. Sometimes it's a grandmother's radio that crackles like static from another lifetime. Other times, it's a worn-out laptop that holds the only job application a single parent can afford to send. Every object carries something more than its parts, and every time I fix one, it feels like I'm stitching something small back into place. Miles still works weekends when school's not too heavy. Sam comes by less now, but he always brings fresh batteries and stories about fishing. We keep things simple. There's no storefront banner, no fancy uniforms, just a bench, some tools, and a quiet rhythm that we've made our own. Clients still call me Rachel the Repair Lady. It started as a joke, but I grew into it. It's the kind of name that sticks when you treat people right and keep your word. I don't need a title with more syllables. That one carries weight in a way I understand. Emily and I talk sometimes, not like sisters who finish each other's sentences, but like women who have seen too much to pretend anymore. She sends me links now and then to business grants or a new soldering kit she thinks I'd like. I say thank you, and that's enough. The world around me still moves fast, still praises loud wins and big stages, but I've found my rhythm in the quiet spaces, in the steady hum of a power tool, in the soft smile of someone picking up something they thought they'd lost. I don't feel the need to prove anything anymore. Not to my family, not to a crowd, not even to myself. Because I know what I've built, and I know it matters. People sometimes ask what I do. I tell them I fix what's broken, then I pause. And if they stay long enough to listen, I let them see that it's not just machines. It's dignity, memory, trust, little things held together by wire and care. You don't have to be loud to be valuable. You don't have to be seen to be real. Sometimes the quietest lives are the most whole. And I'm living mine with both hands open, one holding a screwdriver, the other holding peace.